Hi guys, and welcome to my review of the Teclast Tbook 10. So this is yet another, now I've seen so many of them, Atom X5 Z8300 powered tablet with 4GB of RAM, 64GB eMMC. It does a dual OS and it supports a stylus, what I'll get onto later. And the screen is the same resolution of other tablets we have with the 10.1-inch screen. So we've got the Cube iWork 10 Ultimate and the Chewy HiBook. This is a competitor to those models there. And unlike those models, this tablet actually supports a keyboard dock that has a battery within it, which expands the battery capacity by a further 3,500 milliamp hours. So this is going to be a long review. There are some time codes at the start of the video that you probably saw just flash up, and also in the description in this video in YouTube, so you can skip ahead to the part that interests you. If you don't want to look at the Android portion of the video, just skip ahead to the Windows 10 part. So looking at the design of the Tbook 10, it's got a nice metal frame all around it. It's in a gold color and quite thin. You'll notice that the bezels on this are very small. They're quite good. I'm liking the size of that. They're only about a thumbnail in length. It's about 1.5 centimeters, and one of the smallest. Normally you see some quite large bezels from the Chinese tablets that are out at the moment, but these ones are smaller. So at the front here we have a 2 megapixel front facing camera. There is no camera on the rear whatsoever. We're not really missing out on much because normally those cameras offer very poor quality anyway. So down at the bottom we have the 2 slots there for the keyboard, which unfortunately don't have at the moment. That'll come in a later video. And you can see we have a 10-port poker pin here instead of the usual 5. That is because of obviously the charge that needs to go through. And on the left-hand side, sorry, the right-hand side of the tablet, we have the DC in for charging. Now that is 9 volts, 2 amps, and there's a mini HDMI out, micro USB 2, and our micro SD card slot and 3.5mm headphone jack. On the top right, power on and volume up and down. And it does have a very nice build to it. I do like it. Feels really good. Feels premium, I would say. No flex in it whatsoever. Very solid, very well put together. And all in all, no complaints. It has definitely got a top build quality. Now to show you the screen here, now the maximum brightness it has is 250 lumens of brightness, so it is not the brightest screen, and there is a small little bit of light leakage just along the outer edges here, but I don't find it too bothersome, and it is a very common thing. Now viewing angles, you can see there, they are good. It's an IPS panel, and I don't really find it to be that bad, especially indoor use. The brightness, I think, is fine, but if you're going to be using this outside, well, you're going to struggle anyway. First with the reflections, and second, just that maximum brightness there of 250 is a little bit on the dim side there. I would definitely like to see a minimum of about 300. So if I turn the lights back on here and just quickly show you that we do have a gap in the panel between the digitizer glass and the IPS panel below. You see there's probably about, I'd say approximately 1.5 millimeter gap there. It isn't too bad and isn't too distracting. So when you first power up the Tbook 10, you get this dual boot selector menu. Now it's a slightly different menu from what we normally see from Teclast, and down here you can select either to disable the dual boot menu, and here you have your operating system choices there, so you can either select Windows or Android, and when you are within either of those operating systems you can also just toggle where there's a toggle inside the operating system to allow you just to swap the operating systems right over. What it has on it is a very stock-like launcher they are using, and that is really good to see because they used to use what was called the T launcher by Teclast, their own custom launcher that was just laggy and horrible. So it's running Android 5.1. This is the version I have, and there are over-the-air updates. There is Teclast's own inbuilt system. They will push through updates when necessary to fix any bugs, which is this right here. So it is good to see we have that on board. Now, bloat on there was a little bit of bloat. Luckily, you can uninstall all of it, which is, again, very good to see. And the performance of the ROM I found to be really good. It has no lag or anything. All in all, I do like the ROM, and it's definitely one of the better things here. Now, when it comes to free available space, because it is dual boot, you don't really get a huge amount, but you do at least divide it up the way they've partitioned it. You still have some space for some large games to install there. So at the moment I have 12 gigabytes available to me, and I already had installed a bit there. So total space is 17, but you get approximately, I think it was about 16 and a half free. So I went through my usual benchmarks. Now this screenshot here is what the ROM is like when you first boot it up. So you do have, you can see quite a few bloatware applications, but as mentioned, you can remove those. Once you remove them, that is how it will look like. You just got the essential applications there. Play Store, of course, is on there and working just fine. So this is the Geekbench 3 score here. That is more or less a good score for this chipset. Tbook 10 and Tutu 6.1.4 score. Anything close to 60,000 is good for the Atom Z8300. You can see that is similar to other devices there, like the Xiaomi Mi 4S, Meizu M3. Finer details there if people want to compare that to their own tablet. And battery life. Okay, I did a battery life test here within Android, and it told me I've got a working battery life of 3 hours and 39 minutes. Now the display was configured to the 200 nits of brightness that they suggest in the benchmark, which is almost the maximum brightness of the screen. All in all, that score is a little disappointing, but do bear in mind that there is the keyboard, which will boost that battery life, I imagine, by another hour and a half. There's some details there of the PC Mark work scores, so 4,760. And those were the benchmarks I ran on it there, so disappointing a little the battery life. Now one thing to point out too within the ROM, that all you need to do is just swipe down to the toggle here, OS switch, so tapping that you can switch straight over to Windows. Now I'll just quickly demonstrate what it's like, the speed of it when you're surfing the internet. So I'm just going to run the browser here. This is the stock Android. So initially it starts out with Teclast's site, of course. So just go over to TechTablets.com here. Never loaded this up before, so this will be interesting to see how it works. Now, in regards to wireless performance, because it has the all-metal back around it, I have felt that the signal strength downstairs, moving away from my wireless router, isn't as strong as other tablets like the Cube iWork 10 Ultimate, and that's because that has plastic on the back where I think the antenna is housed. This, of course, doesn't. So we struggle a little bit for strength, but overall I found it to be okay. So just go along here. So performance of that is, you know, it's not too bad. You can see, well, this is quite a heavy side because there's a lot of images on there, but it loads in, and all in all, the touchscreen accuracy of it is good. It's definitely not iPad Pro smoothness and accuracy there, but it's not too bad. And you can, of course, play YouTube clips in there without any problems. Let's have a quick listen to the sound.
Hi guys, Chris here and welcome to my review of the Xiaomi Mi Max. This is a very large mobile phone that has a 6.44-inch screen on it. You can see the size of it. It's not going to be a mobile phone for everyone using it.
So it sounds okay. Now they're not the loudest speakers, but you do get, as mentioned, the stereo separation in the beginning, that there's one speaker on either side there. So it's definitely a better than the likes of the Cube iWork 10 Ultimate, which is in the same category as the Tbook 10 here. Let's have a quick look now at Google Play, the performance of that. Seems okay because it has to load in all those images there for the logos, the icons there for each app, but overall it's not too bad. You see there's a few lags there, but that is probably going to be the same on every single Atom out there. So I'm just going to quickly have a look for Clash of Clans. Haven't searched this or installed this game, and see how long it takes. So that pops up relatively quick, and just install it. So I'll install this now and move on to just test out a few games and see how they run on the Tbook 10 here. So first up, Clash of Clans for my little gaming test here. This isn't really a demanding game, but it can actually get laggy on some systems. See, performance there is okay, not probably as smooth as I'd like it to be. Bit of slowdown there. Modern Combat 5. Frame rate doesn't seem too bad. Let's have a look how it runs outside. Real Racing 3. Okay, so Mortal Kombat X running a little slow. You can see that definitely about 10 frames per second here, so not good to see. It is struggling with this game. So let's have a look and see now how warm it's getting. I've been doing a bit of gaming a lot longer than what this edit is going to be in this video, so let's have a look. So around 30 degrees, it feels a little warm on the screen. 37, so it is definitely getting quite hot around here. That is actually not too bad considering the X98 Kendo from Teclast that I reviewed got up to 50 degrees. So let's see the rear of the machine. So about 31. She doesn't feel as hot. Just around this area actually. That's probably where the Atom chipset is. Just around there. So 52 degrees max. So overall I think temperature's going to be okay, but the longer you play the more those temperatures will start to creep up. But nothing alarming like the Teclast X89 Kendo that I reviewed a couple of weeks ago. Just to point out that in Android, the stylus does not seem to work at all. It's missing drivers or something. Stylus is what I would call a dumb stylus because it doesn't actually have any pressure sensitivity whatsoever. So really, it just adds a little bit more accuracy than your finger, and that is really about it. But I'll show you later in Windows. So now to move over to Windows, and the Windows part of the review, you just simply need to pull that down, and now it's going to restart over into Windows 10. In Windows, we have 15.6 gigabytes free, and I'll show you that is Windows 10. If Cortana there lets me, here we go, System, that Windows 10 64-bit, of course, so we can access that full 4 gigabytes of RAM, and Windows activated without any problems there, which normally happens. You're very, very rare now to see Chinese tablets that don't have a valid Windows 10 license. And under Device Manager, have a quick look at what components we have here. So under the disk drive, we've got a generic N card, which we sometimes see crop up on Teclast, but not normally. Now, normally these drives are a little bit slow. I will have the benchmarks of that shortly. And the network adapter is a Broadcom instead of the normal Realtek we see literally in 95% of these tablets. So that's only wireless in 2.4 gigahertz. It does not support dual band. That also handles Bluetooth 4.0. So on to the benchmarks here in Windows. This is the internal drive, so that's that N-card eMMC. You see that the read and write speeds, I guess they're okay. Where it suffers definitely has to be the 4K randoms there, quite low. So installing programs, you'll probably notice maybe it's a little bit slower, but I haven't noticed really any slowdown within Windows at all. So it does support 128 gigabyte SD cards. That's the largest one I have that I can test, and those are the speeds there. So it is definitely supporting the ultra high speed cards there. And if I move over to the benchmarks I ran. So here is the wireless speed. Now that is a good speed, but what I have noticed is mentioned in the Android portion of the review that I noticed that if I go downstairs, the wireless range doesn't seem as good as other tablets, slightly less. These speeds here will be halved when I'm downstairs, where furthest away from my router. Here is the Geekbench 3 score. Ice Storm 1.2. Ice Storm Extreme 1.2. CloudGate 1.1. And finally, to really push it, I even ran 3D Mark 11, which was extremely slow, and that has a P313 score. So temperatures through those benchmarks and really pushing it hard. I kept looping 3D Mark 3 or 4 times actually, just to get it nice and hot. So I did manage to get it up to 81 degrees there, but no thermal throttling. Now I also wanted to check and see whether the Tbook 10 here would be able to power an external hard drive. Often tablets fail and don't output enough power to power a 1TB external hard drive here. This is a Toshiba one at the moment, so I'm just going to plug that in and see if it will let me actually access it. Okay, looking good. Now the white light means USB 2. If that was lit up in blue, that would be USB 3, but obviously it's only a USB 2 port. So that is actually working fine. I can access all my files there from the 1TB drive. So what is it like to use? Performance-wise, I find that for an Atom Z8300, it performs fine. Edge works especially well, very smooth there. The touchscreen, I find, is responsive enough. Accuracy is a little less than Android, but that's normally the case because Windows really isn't that well optimized. Of course, I'm using Windows as a desktop here in desktop mode and not using the tablet-friendly touch mode because I wanted to have easier access to the taskbar here to show everything, so that's why I'm doing that. But you can go through different tabs here. I'm just going to quickly load up TechTablets.com to show you how that loads up, which is quite an image-heavy website. So the keyboard on it, I find it's quite easy to use using it in portrait like this. And just like any Windows 10 keyboard, easy to type on, even though I just made a bit of a typo there. So we'll see how this loads up. Should be relatively quick. There's quite a few images on there. And there we go, it has loaded the whole page in there without too much of a problem. And using it, of course, in landscape, which I prefer for looking at the internet. Unless, of course, I've got a 3:2 ratio screen. But this is a 16:10. It's not too bad. Very good performance within Edge here. Of course, if you try Chrome, it's definitely a little bit slower. Chrome doesn't run as well on the Atoms and not as quick and smooth as this. So I'm just going to quickly play now a 4K clip that I recorded using my Sony AX33. Now this is a 60 megabit per second 4K clip. And we'll test out the speakers as well. 100% volume.
It's Chris here with the PC Mark result on the Xiaomi Mi Max. So it's worked out a battery work time of figures there. So if I'm going to have a look now, and screen on time is so far impressed with the battery life, not on automatic.
So that is working okay, but you'll probably hear that the speakers are absolutely pathetic in Windows. They are even worse. Android didn't seem too bad, and I said that the speakers there were, you know, average. But here in Windows, they are extremely poor, these speakers. They lack, I would say, a good 30-40% volume compared to Android. I'm not really too sure why, but that is always the case, it seems. And it's got something to do with the drivers. Android, for some reason, seems to boost the sound a little bit better and definitely a lot louder. Now, I quickly wanted to do a 4K streaming test here. This is from YouTube, running Edge again, and you'll see that I've just enabled the stats for nerds, it's called there, to have a look and see what drop frames we've got. So that is now on the 4K resolution, which is 2160p. I'm going to place that in full screen and see how it runs that. So it can keep up with that just fine. Now I've disabled the sound. I turned the sound off just in case because sometimes they have music tracks that'll give me copyright problems. So that is the reason why I've turned that off. So that is just fine. There's no drop frames there whatsoever. So the stylus here doesn't work at all in Android, but it does work in Windows. I'm just going to quickly run OneNote and show you how it performs. So I did a little testing with it before. What it does is it will actually wreck the screen protector. Now I used to have a screen protector on this screen, but I had to remove that. It doesn't seem to scratch the glass, but what it did with the screen protector was completely, literally just cut it out and damage it quite a lot. So here I've already had a short little scribble there before, just to show you quickly that it does, as soon as it's close to the screen, it does offer some kind of, well, some palm rejection. There's no pressure sensitivity. So if I just, actually sorry, I need to go into the draw mode here. So there we go, I can use my finger, and as soon as the stylus is there, zero palm rejection. But once it's literally touching the screen, now my finger's not doing anything. So there's no pressure sensitivity. If I just try and write simply here, hello, you see what happened then? Because it's only activating the palm rejection as soon as it literally touching the screen, you get that horrible, just it drew a line there, which is not good at all. So I'm trying to write hello here. This is honestly, it's a useless stylus. The only really thing it's good at, I would say, is a more precise pointer. You're not going to be able to write properly with this. You need something like a Wacom, or at least the active pressure sensitive styluses that a lot of other tablets. But this stylus definitely gets a big thumbs down from me. It is bar on completely useless. Just to quickly touch on the battery life. So you get around about 4 hours out of this. Now there is something going on here with the battery not being calibrated correctly, because when you run it right down to, say, I think it's 7%, it will continue on for at least another half an hour or 40 minutes, almost an hour. So something wrong with the calibration here. Now it's saying that it only has a 4,590 milliamp hour battery within there, which isn't correct, because according to the specs, it's supposed to have a 6,500 milliamp hour battery, and then the tablet dock has an additional 3,500. I would say with the dock and the internal battery, so with the two batteries together, you should be able to get more or less, I would say, 7 hours, maybe 6 to 7 hours. So okay, kind of battery life here. But the calibration issue does make it seem like you're running out of battery a lot quicker. You look down here, that's telling me I only have, I'm at 85%, I only have 3.5 hours left, and it's currently been on for 37 minutes, and that has consumed 15%. So battery life, yes, average, not the best. The Tbook is one of the few tablets that I have seen that will allow you to actually charge via the micro USB 2 port or the DC port there. So using a 2 amp 9 volt charger there, it will charge at approximately 3 hours to fully charge, which isn't bad at all. So it's quite quick, aided by the extra volts it has there. You can see there's a tiny little Stylus LED light that lights up, and if you use micro USB, you're looking around 5 hours, so almost 2 hours extra there. Quite slow to charge, and if you try and charge it when in use, it will not actually gain any charge using the micro USB 2 port there. If you use the DC jack, then it will actually be able to charge. The front-facing camera is only 2 megapixels, and I find the quality to actually be alright. I've used it in Skype, and here's just a sample there. It's fine as long as you're in good lighting. If you go into a dark, dim-lit room, then it will get very grainy and very pixely, which is always the case with these kind of cameras there. We are missing a camera on the rear, but honestly, like I mentioned before, that you're not really missing out on much, because your mobile phone will take a far superior image than what any rear-facing camera would. So this is a store game, Asphalt 8 Airborne. It's definitely not running at 30 frames per second. It's a little stuttery, a little slow. Let's see how League of Legends runs. Now I'm using a keyboard to control the game. Alright, so the default settings running in, I think it's 1080p here. That's just too slow. You can see 18 frames per second. I'm definitely going to have to lower that down now. Alright, so I changed the resolution to 1024 by 768, and you can see already hitting around, well, 30 frames per second, sorry, 60. But it's only just the beginning of the game here, so we'll see how it goes. But it seems definitely going to be playable. Should be anyway, because it does run on other Atom X 8300s. Okay, dipping down to about 30 then. Alright, so it's safe for me to say now that you're at least going to get around 30, 20, maybe it might dip down to about 25 frames per second, but I'd still say it's going to be just playable there. You can, of course, lower resolution down even further from what I have here. Now look at Counter-Strike Global Offensive running on the lowest settings, 800 times 600. Everything is set to low, and I'm going to play the Dust 2 map. Okay, so you can already see it's running quite slow there, around 20 frames per second. So 24 frames per second, dipping, not really ideal frame rates. A lot of lag there with the smoke. And I'm dead. So just to recap my findings, that I think the build quality of the Tbook 10 here is excellent. The full metal alloy rear on it is very nice. And we do have smaller bezels that are only around about a thumbnail in width, which we normally see on these tablets a lot larger than that. So that is good to see. Now I don't have the keyboard, so I cannot comment on that yet until I actually receive that, but that should add additional battery life. The battery life is one of the worst parts of this tablet because it's a little disappointing to only get around 3.5 to 4 hours in Windows and about 4.5 for in Android. It's not really the best. Now there's something going on also with the calibration there with the battery, how it still runs even though it's on 7%, it will still keep going for a little while longer. I've seen that on other tablets before. And the next worst thing too is the speakers, which in Windows are very bad. But in Android they're average, but in Windows they just aren't loud enough and they do lack a lot of, there's no bass to them, just tinny, not very good there. But the screen is nice. Okay, maybe it's a little on the dull side maximum brightness, but you can probably see here, this is 100% brightness and it looks quite good indoors. So I don't really think that too many people are going to have a problem with that brightness level. Aside from those two real issues, there's a minor issue too, which is the wireless reception. It doesn't have the range I've seen of other tablets, but it's not deal breaker range. I don't think. It's still okay. I'd classify that as, yeah, it's alright, but not the best. Thanks for watching this video, and hopefully see you back in the channel with more up and coming reviews of tech from China.